Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone was rolled away from the entrance. So she ran to Simon Peter and to the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have put him." So Peter and John started for the tomb. Both were running, but John outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent over and looked in at the strips of linen lying there, but he did not go in. Simon Peter, who was behind him, arrived and went on into the tomb. He also saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the burial cloth that had been around Jesus' head. The cloth was folded up by itself, separate from the linens. And finally, the other disciple, the one who had reached the tomb first, went inside. He saw and believed, though they still did not understand from Scripture what Jesus had to rise from the dead. The disciples went back to their homes, but Mary stood outside the tomb crying. And as she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white, seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head, one at the foot. "Woman, why are you crying?" "Because they've taken my Lord away, and I don't know where they have put him." She then turned and saw Jesus standing there, but did not recognize him. "Woman," said Jesus, "why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?" And she thought he was but a gardener and said, "If you've carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will go to him." And he said, "Mary." She turned and cried out, "Rabboni," teacher. And he said, "Do not touch me, for I have not yet returned to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am returning to my Father, your Father, to my God, your God." And Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the Lord," and they didn't believe. The word of the Lord in the house of the Lord. Now, I didn't realize that my reputation as a preacher had spread so far, but he's obviously heard about my sermons. If you can't see him, he's gone, man. He's out. Right now, I envy him. I'd rather be there than listening to me. They went to the tomb and they didn't believe. He spent 3 years teaching them. He spent 3 years training them. He spent 3 years indoctrinating, and they went to the tomb and they didn't believe. It is a stretch to think that someone who had been put into a tomb could be gone, just gone. It isn't magical tricks, it's a mystery. There's no trick involved. There is a mystery involved. And what God has put into place, we need to accept, even some of the things that we don't understand. Oh, it must have been tough. Mary went with the sole purpose of dressing a dead body so that it would not stink, that it would not depress people around, that it would be something of honor that they could do for him. And then not to have the body there. She's all prepared. She's got the nard, she's got all of the oils and fragrant stuff, and no body. So she went and told Peter and John, and they raced each other to the tomb. John got there first, but he wasn't going in first. He looked first, but he ain't going in. Peter went in and saw what was there. The headpiece, the linen from the head, was folded very neatly, separate from the burial linens. Now, if you're familiar with Jewish tradition, the man of the house determined when the meal was over. If he decided to leave the table for some reason and was not done eating, he would very carefully fold his napkin, put it beside his plate. And if his napkin was folded neatly, the servants would not clear the table, because this was a clear signal that he was coming back. So the folded headpiece, the linen, was a clear indication that Jesus was coming back. Well, On the other hand, if the senior member of the family decided the meal was over, he just wadded up his napkin and put it on the plate, and if you weren't done eating, you were. Because when he was done, everybody was done. So we and it's a great story, and we've all heard the story, and we've all thought about the story, but the thing that is impressive is that these people who were so close to him, denied him 3 times the night before, turned their back on him when he was in his deepest amount of trouble, and went to the tomb and didn't believe. Rather, they were looking for a reason for him to not be there, when there really was a very good reason for him to not be there. For if he wasn't gone, then all of our hopes are worthless. All of our hopes and dreams are dashed, and they're worthless. But we can count on the love of God. We did sunrise this morning at 7 o'clock, and we have a little tradition. If we have a March Easter, then we open that door. And at 7 o'clock, there's a beam of light that comes through that door and lights the railing. This was in April. It lit the doorway, and that's it. Pretty much a downer for that. But we can always figure out when Easter is going to be, because Easter is the first Sunday following the first full moon following the spring equinox. Right? The first full moon was at 2:29 Friday morning. So this is the first Sunday following that first full moon. And it's just about as late as we can get. So I'm hoping next year that we have a March so I can do mine, because it's beautiful. Tradition. I mentioned it to the kids. The traditions are important. The lilies are a tradition. The lilies have nothing to do with the resurrection, except they demonstrate to us the fact that in order for a lily to come, the bulb beneath it has to die and then be resurrected as a beautiful plant. Now, I've told you, we've got volunteer lilies in our front yard. Some time ago, soon after we moved in, I decided that it would be wonderful to have a 9-foot, 18-inch deep pond in my front yard. So I dug the hole, moved the dirt aside, put in a kid's wading pool, filled it up with water. Do you know what happens with water in this part of the world when the wind blows? The only good thing that was ever in that pond, one day I found a $20 bill. I checked it every day for the next year. Nothing. But over here where I piled the dirt that I had dug out, there were suddenly some green things coming up with blossoms like this. And for 21 years, they have come up in about the same place. Sometimes as many as 60 blossoms. And I have given them great benign neglect, and they have done wonderfully without me. This year we'll see what I've done to them, because I gave them Miracle-Gro. I have nothing to do with it. I don't know where the bulbs came from originally. I just know that it gets a little bigger every year. You're supposed to dig up the bulbs and dry them and then replant them. Don't bother. They'll just grow anyway. But the thing that we need to remember about our faith is it isn't like those volunteer lilies. Oh yeah, if you got a modicum of faith, it'll develop, it'll grow, it'll get bigger. But if you really want your faith to grow, you got to dig around the roots. Yeah, you got to give it Miracle-Gro. Yeah, you got to tend. You have to tend your faith if you expect it to grow. It won't get beautiful all by itself. When we're called to the tomb, were expected to believe. On that Friday when Christ was put to death was the darkest day his disciples had ever known. But what they didn't know was that though it was Friday, Sunday was coming. And now we've come to Easter Sunday, and now we see the resurrection, and now we see the end of the story. No, we see the beginning of the story for us. For there is no end to the story of Jesus and his love. There is no end to the growth of faith that we can have. But there's a Sunday for every Friday in your life. And we've had a few Fridays. I can sympathize, I can empathize, I can understand the disciples who, at least for a moment, didn't believe. And I think probably almost every one of us here has had a time when believing was just more difficult than we could do. But it isn't the last time, because as I said, for every Friday in your life, there is a Sunday coming. For every dark day, there is a brilliant resurrection. That's what Easter is about. Not about the darkness, not about the death, but about the brilliance of the resurrection and the faith that grows simply because we allow it to. Oh, I could kill those lilies, but it would take some effort. And I would rather watch them than kill them. I would rather tend my faith than to let it die of neglect. Easter is about tending your faith. Easter is about believing in what can be in your life. Easter is about believing in Sunday, not living on Fridays. Amen. Don't dwell on the Fridays. They come and they go. Exult in the Sundays, the joy, the love, the peace that passes all understanding. Go in that peace. Amen.